So what we do in the IOC program is we have a program based on history, social criticism, about anthropological application, like what is going to happen with our human culture in the future, and where does it come from. Of course, this is also our historical background. There is also the approach of what does Chinese medicine actually want itself, and how is China going to evolve over time, and how is it different with its own history, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of these kind of things, and there's of course the original cultural science of China, which is of course the core of everything. There are actually quite a lot of people watching my channel. They're following me also on social media, and it would be nice for these people to join my channel, whether it's here on YouTube or on Patreon. It would be even better to become a paying member of my Patreon channel, or to follow my classes and support therefore with my work, my research, and also my studies of Chinese medicine as a whole, the history of it, and sharing this with you. This is also important to understand what is the difference with TCM, what is the difference with West medicine, what's the difference with intuitive medicine, and so on and so on, other natural medicines. What are all these systems wanting? And when you look at it from that perspective, you can see that Chinese medicine in origin is medicine first. Already in the Sui dynasty, long time ago, there were the first treatises that were showing that exercise was seen as the most important part. Healthcare was not available to everybody, right? So when people would have something like they would lose a child or a person in the family because their spirit was disappearing in the underground or in a tree, or was stolen by a demon, or they were possessed, or they had infections, or they lost a limb or anything like that, they came to all kind of different kind of people who worked partly from a historical perspective of the Chinese medicine classics like the Hongdian I Ching. They were Daoists, or they were shamans, or they were other kinds of healers, herbalists, con men, con women, all these kind of things. They were available also, of course. But you see that primarily the idea of Chinese medicine was exercise first, then massage and acupuncture, which are extensions of each other, right? So you can do particular kind of things with massage and particular kind with acupuncture, but acupuncture is just a particular kind of invasive form of massage. That is important to realize. These kind of things all come together with food medicine. At the moment, when you look at it from that perspective, you can see if you don't have good food medicine, then your perspective on Chinese medicine is only half, right? When you look at the perspective of the theoretical frameworks of Chinese medicine, whether it is the Zhenbao Jing, whether it is about the materia medica of the Shenong, or if it is from later times, primarily the assumption is that herbal medicine is an extension of food medicine. So that means that it is a specialized food, and it needs particular kind of understanding about the normalcy of particular kind of diets before you actually apply herbal medicine. So it means you first have to try to correct your diet on the ideal perspective. And you might probably have heard or seen it in Chinese drama that at the courts the emperor would have his own cooks, and they would cook for him and the queen and the princess and the princesses every day other food. They would select by feeling the pulse and select, oh, today you need to eat this, today you eat that. And they had a long-term agenda for the well-being of the emperor in mind. This is actually the approach on which Chinese medicine is being based. Chinese medicine is not based on the curing of poor people, but it's actually based on the curing of rich people. And there were cures for poor people too, but that was much less available, and that is also the reason why poor people usually didn't get that old as the rich people did. There are interesting social studies on these kind of histories, and it's important to understand about this too. So that has to be included in the program. They have to understand where Chinese medicine comes from. It is not just a medicine of the people. That is just what it is right now, because it is an identifier with Chinese culture. It's China soft power in TCM, right? So that is an important thing to understand. Then at the moment when you are understanding this, you start to have an idea about what your clients need, what you need, and what you should be activist on in your life. And for me, that is clearly the kind of social change that you want to have to make sure that particular kind of things do not happen, but they seem to be so unavoidable. I mentioned it before, as a prospecting student, are you rational or are you not rational? Are you in a sort of dire need? So that reduces your chance for being rational already alone to a large degree. The thing is that advertisement does not play on your rationality. Advertisement plays on your emotions, on your feelings, and these are usually the popular feelings that are going to be reinforced because of the advertisement. So this is why making an advertisement is very difficult for Chinese medicine when you are serious about what you're teaching. When you are not that serious, or if you already have a reputation that you built yourself on, then of course that is very different, because then promoting yourself as being the biggest school or the most important school, or having all the right verifications and so on, that becomes a real argument. We do real TCM without understanding or explaining what real TCM actually is. You use all the time false or hollow arguments. This is not necessarily what the student is looking for, but that is what is available to them, and that is what they're being triggered on. In marketing, people are continuously being seduced to partake in something that they didn't want to have, like buying a new washing machine, the most beautiful car, beautiful clothing, TCM course. Or you go to a Qigong healer. Same difference. But at the moment when you are really seriously getting involved in the study, then you go through particular kind of steps, and we're going to talk about these steps in this new part. And this is not the easiest part, because when we talk about the trans-theoretical model, there are particular kind of aspects that you need to understand. When you look at yourself, and I hope you can accept that without getting angry at me, is that we are in essence not very rational. We are opportunistic creatures and we rationalize. There's all kinds of things that we find important reasons, while they in fact are maybe not that important. And at the moment when they are not that important, but we can make them important for ourselves, so we can go in agreement with that. Sometimes we decide something on impulse, and then afterwards you're going to rationalize why it was a good decision. It can be your study, it can be your work, it can be your relationship with your parents, it can be your relationship with your partner, male, female, animal, children, whatever kind of things. You can have a relationship with people, with all kinds of things, with your car. These are based on, very often, on rationalizations. That doesn't necessarily make them bad, because there can still be good reasons. You can intuitively checked in on a particular level of safety or security or comfort or understanding or power over a situation. All these kind of things are all relevant. But at the moment when you are making a decision for a study as a school, you expect that people make a rational decision, and there are many kind of reasons which are all equally valid why to study a particular kind of study. My school is an online school, so that means that you can study it from any time. The school also has a double pattern, a linear pattern of learning, where you start and you go into that pattern and you follow it in your own pace with coaching and stuff. But there's also a non-linear pattern, which is basically the social group pattern. That is the classes that are also following their own speed, and you drop in somewhere, just somewhere. It will be small chance that you're going to start somewhere at the beginning. There are particular modules that are running parallel on each other, like for instance the study of Yin Yang, Wu Xing and so on, as part of the I Ching studies, and the way how to learn diagnosis over time. That's a 2-year program where you have to learn everything that is important to know about Yin Yang, Wu Xing. Not just how to cast the I Ching thing, because that's not that important, but you have to understand how people used to think about I Ching, how they used to think about Yin Yang, Wu Xing, how is the mechanisms of that logic actually happening, and how does it actually apply to your body, to your mind, to your social environment, to the world at large, and so on and so on. So this is then what you can use as a basic language to formulate your logic onto. So this is very important, but at the same time you have to learn about Yangsheng, you have to learn about anatomy, physiology from Chinese medicine perspective, you have to learn about how to exercise the third level Qigong, like the Zhongwu Qigong, which is originating on the principles of both Zhang Zhangfen and Sen Xing Miao, which is really great. And there is also, of course, the application of understanding of the channels and what they are doing, and so forth and so forth, how health works, and not just how your profession works in Yangsheng studies, but also in how health works in general. You have to understand about alchemy, you have to learn how to do Kung Fu fitness, you have to learn how to meditate, you have to learn how to nourish yourself and how to help other people nourish themselves. You have to learn how to massage, how to control the yang by helping people to regulate their vitality in general, and you have to learn you have to teach, guide people with helping with their digestion so that they can lose weight or gain weight or whatever kind of things are relevant within their problem, within their life. You have to also understand that Chinese medicine doesn't really have an idea about trauma. Yes, of course, trauma is very important, but in Chinese medicine we are talking about a process of change where every part of our life is actually created by the things that we do. So every day, from whatever kind of reasons, we do all kinds of things, and trauma is basically getting stuck in a particular kind of action, and that is usually induced by both ourselves as well as our society. And physical trauma, mental trauma, emotional trauma, of course, they are different. I got asked sometimes, like, what would you do on PTSD, for instance, which is a valid reasoning, which is more emphasized, I think, in the Americas than in the Europe, but trauma is being maintained to a large degree by our behavior. For instance, if you're overweight and you keep eating beans every day or other kind of ingredients which are high saturating because you think otherwise you're not going to have enough energy of the day, then of course that is going to be a problem. If you are depressed but you remain dependent on medication, that is going to be a problem. So you have to develop a strategy, and for this you need a systematic approach, and that is what Chinese medicine actually offers in that sense, and that helps you then, of course, gradually realize that these problems are not just your problem, but they are a social problem. And I'm not even talking about the economical problems that are causing these things, or that you are going to be victimized by as a result of having this problem. Yeah, so it is a very complicated problem, and probably we have to talk about that in another perspective more extensively. If you like that, then just let me know. In the trans-theoretical model, you go through different kind of stages. There's the first one, there's the pre-considering stage. In the pre-considering stage, you are considering to go do something. Like we talked before about, if you consider to go study natural medicine, what kind of Chinese medicine natural medicine do you do? Will you choose Chinese medicine, and so on and so on. That is a very important part, because that's the yes-no stage of your decision-making process. Yes, I'm going to study natural medicine. Then the next part that we can go to is the contemplative stage. And the contemplative stage is basically where you're weighing the cons and the pros of where you are going to. It is based on a theory for considerations in therapeutic choices for a person, but it is also valid for every person in the sense that where are you going to with your career, what are you going to do? You're going to take the cons and pros of different kind of schools. You do not necessarily take the one most close to you, but you take the one that is the most promising in relationship to your ideals and your affection and so on. So you build basically a relationship with the ideas of that school, so you have to be really very clear about that. Try not to be a populist, because as you know, populists are usually getting stuck in their own thoughts, and they are limiting themselves into a very tiny box, and as a result of that they become very fanatical in many cases. They do not become a relativist in their approach of things, and that means that as a diagnostician they will think black and white usually, and they don't understand the nuance, because they don't understand the nuance of being body and being mind and being emotional and being a social animal also at the same time. These kind of things are of course important. Then the next stage is the preparatory stage. In the preparatory stage you are going to go basically set the limits, or you create a space for actually doing a particular kind of thing. So if you have decided, like, okay, I'm going to do Chinese medicine, I want to study at that school, this is their demands. Like in my school, I ask for people to take at least 2 to 4 hours every day to do your practices, depending on your timing of how to do the practices. And for the Zongwuchgong and the meditation, you need 1, maybe 2 hours every day, period, just to get to a good understanding of the terminology of Chinese medicine. So this is just a requirement. You don't have to do all the time the same, because the alchemical process goes through particular kind of stages of 100 days, 9 months, and so on and so forth. So you have to be guided in the process so that you become independent in that process and you can do it anytime. But that means also that if you are having work, or you're having a relationship where you live with, or there's other things that you have to take care of, you have to make sure that your agenda is such a way that you have place and time for the studies, because you're going to get behind. And my school is very easy. If you get behind, no problem. We don't leave anybody dead on the battlefield and then we just leave. No, we take you with us. You can take as long as you want, as long as you need for your studies, because we understand that study has to fit into life, but you have to understand also that if you take more time for your study, you're going to spend more money. So the idea of the study is to be able to study it for the minimum amount of cost, and that is then what is required. Everything else then will take you longer time, but it also means that you're longer time donating to the school to keep open for you at that moment. And that is great. I'm very happy with everybody who takes a long time and goes very deep and they ask really serious questions. It's not a problem. If you go through emotional spell, or because of whatever kind of circumstances you need to take a break, all these kind of things are all valid things. But we want to go towards a university program. That means that you have to be able to run inside university programs from other schools. That means that the topics that you have to study have to go deep enough so that you can fit into the other programs. And it means you have to learn things like doing investigation, research, writing papers, and so on and so forth, because otherwise you can't. And that doesn't mean that you have to be able to write a paper of 10, 15 pages, but you have to be on a continuous basis doing research, giving presentations, and actually writing enough papers so that eventually you have enough material to write your bachelor and your master paper, which is, the master paper is of course much more in-depth towards your professional goals as a therapist or a teacher, while your bachelor program has to teach you the basics. Most schools, why they're technical schools, is because you start from day one learning the basic framework of theory that you can explain in 5 minutes, and then you go start memorizing formulas of how to treat and what points and why and how to measure and so on and so forth. So you immediately go into the practical field. That is for an assistant, that's fine, but it's legally is not good enough to become a therapist. I'm really sorry to say if you have studied like that, but that is just based on the morality of education. Chinese medicine traditionally had like many years of education, private study with somebody in somebody's therapeutic environment, family or whatever, and it took a long time. After the acting part, you go into the maintenance part, and this is the most important part, because I say very often to people like, okay, you are going to exercise until you are bored. And then at the moment when you are bored, once you get past the boredom in your practice, then at that moment you actually start learning. Then at that moment you start understanding. So when you have experience in the beginning, wonderful, but they will adapt and change over time. That's also why exercising always has to go together with make a diary of your exercises, because you have to understand your own process over time. Process work is always so slow, and you have to go through these kind of processes to get to the point where you can not only understand what things mean, but also where you can handle them. So in energy work, as we see nowadays in Qigong, people are very quickly saying like, oh, I can do that, and then sometimes they are immediately reclassified as a healer or as a whatever kind of thing. But the reality is that you need a particular kind of maturation, both in your profession and in your theoretical framework and in yourself as a being of, well, maybe rational, maybe spiritual nature. These are difficult terms to talk about, especially when you talk about spiritual, because oh man, I don't feel myself anything spiritual. So everybody who tells me like, oh, but you're a very spiritual person, I always have to laugh a little bit shy, because I don't know what it means. The last stage then is the determination stage, and this is basically where you can become self-sufficient and you can understand where you have, what kind of validity you have gained through that process. And it is not when you think you are there, but when you are sure you are there. And that is depending on process work. Like for instance, I know my qualities as a therapist, I know my qualities as a teacher, I know my qualities as a practitioner, and I know my qualities and so forth, but I also know my weaknesses because I have so much experience. I started when I was 11 and now I'm about 50 years further. That is a long time of experience, and I've gone through many stages where I thought like, I'm really the man, but basically looking back, it was nothing, right? So when I went to China, I came to realize a lot of the things that I learned, how valuable they were and how they were not present in China almost. The few people that I found who were able to help me in that perspective, they were mostly people who prefer to stay anonymous because of the global, political, whatever kind of situation and history of the Cultural Revolution, which really shocked a lot of people. When you think about it like that, these translation works that they have at their school, this is unique material. This is really contributing to my understanding of Chinese medicine, but it is also upsetting the TCM model. That doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to the TCM model eventually, because it can be a choice that you want to make, right? Because you want to maybe fit in. But we are studying what is Chinese medicine. And then from there you can say, okay, one of the side steps is TCM. This is not a side step from TCM, it's the other way around, right? There's other schools who have models from the past, and for them TCM also is a side step. Either they use it or they don't use it, it doesn't really matter. But if you choose to really study Chinese medicine, then you have to choose also the discomfort of that study. And this is why the theoretical model, the trans-theoretical model, is actually very helpful at the moment when you talk about how to reach out to people when they want to study Chinese medicine. When I make the shorts of this video, maybe there will be some aspects that I think like, oh, these are really good for promoting our school. But theoretically, I don't believe so much that you can make advertisement for a Chinese medicine school. But what I can do is I can try to show my best face as a Chinese medicine practitioner, as a teacher, as a Qigong practitioner, and so on and so forth. By doing so, I might help some people recognize what is valid about Chinese medicine, what is valid about TCM, what is not, and what is not on my system too. Same, right? You have to always work from your integrity, and your integrity is based on your limits. Because from your own perspective, you're always right. That's what's called, that is why it is called being stubborn, opinionated, and so on and so forth. Nobody ever is right. So what I learned about Chinese medicine is to a degree is correct. I shared it with my students, and when I gain new knowledge in my translations or whatever, it is getting immediately into our program so that everybody gets to know about these things. I'm not translating in a modernist perspective. I'm a Daoist after all, and I'm a scientist after all, and to be truthful in what I discover is important. When I make a mistake, I admit my mistakes. That's actually a very important thing. When I see that my reasoning is flawed, I correct myself. If I see somebody else's reasoning is flawed, I will try to be reasonable in explaining why it is flawed. But I cannot always avoid hurting people's feelings. It is not out of malice when I explain people why their reasoning is flawed. It is about the fact that I came to understand things from a slightly different perspective, and I want to share that. And if you don't accept that, that's going to be fine. But as a Chinese medicine school, you have to give a broad impression of how Chinese medicine is, what Chinese medicine is, what it means, and so forth and so forth. You can't work according to one model only. It's just not possible. So thank you for paying attention all the way to the end. You are really such a good meditator. And I hope that you sign up for the channel if you haven't done yet. If you sign up for the courses, that's really great. This is not an advertised program. There is no promotional fee paid for promoting this page. And I'm going to be very happy when you come study with us, because your study, or if you come to me as a client, it's all being put into the research. That's what I live for. And as a Taoist, I'm not supposed to earn a lot of money. So if any money comes in, whether it's big or small, it is going to be into the development of Chinese medicine and everything that is involved in that. Much to the chagrin of some people. Thank you.